His full-time sprint car driving career is over, but Brad Sweet has plenty to keep him busy. On a wide-ranging interview, we'll talk his retirement, best drivers in sprint car racing, the future of high limit, franchises, rules, sprint car tires, and a whole lot more. Let's go. It's Thursday, November 27th. I'm Justin Fiedler. This is DIRTRACKR Daily presented by Kubota Genuine Parts. Your dirt racing viewing options are getting fewer and further between as we head towards the offseason, but one place you can still catch some action this weekend is Flow Racing. They've got USAC midgets from Ventura on Saturday night for Turkey Night. If you want to tune in and don't have a Flow subscription, head over to dirttracker.com/Flow Racing and sign up. If you get it now, you'll get the races I just mentioned, plus the Dome in December, the Lucas Banquet, High Limit in Australia, and the Tulsa Shootout and Chili Bowl. And then from there, you'll be ready to roll straight into the 2026 dirt racing season. I've been a paid Flow Racing subscriber myself for a long time. I've got the apps. I watch on my phone. I use the website. So if you want to join me and thousands of your dirt racing friends, that's dirttracker.com/Flow Racing. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. Hope you get a chance to enjoy the day with family and friends. We'll be back to regularly scheduled daily shows on Sunday. So if any news breaks between Wednesday and then, obviously we'll discuss it here in a few days. For now, though, something a bit different for the holiday weekend. The sprint car season has wrapped up for 2025, and with it, the end of Brad Sweet's incredible full-time driving career. Wins in all the major races, 6 straight titles between the World of Outlaws and High Limit, but now he switches paths. Sweet, along with Kyle Larson and Flow Racing, have been building High Limit, and Sweet will now focus on running the National Touring Series, plus day-to-day operations at Silver Dollar Speedway in California, and the newly acquired NARC Series with partner Kevin Rudeen. Over the next hour, I talk with Brad about his incredible career, the importance of crew chiefs, drivers he likes, and then we go deep on High Limit. That includes the franchise system, the rules, what's next for tires, his relationship with the Outlaws and World Racing Group, the future of dirt racing media and coverage, and a lot more. I hope you enjoy the conversation. So I'm curious, now that you're not a race car driver anymore, I guess I should say that you're not a race car driver anymore. Now that you're not a full-time race car driver anymore, has the last couple of weeks looked different for you versus what would have kind of been a typical, period right after the season ended?
Not really. I think when I made the announcement, you could kind of feel the emotions that I had, of kind of like what was weighing on me as far as, how much time and effort I'd put into all this and, the people around me and the success we had and just kind of calling that part, chapter of my life, kind of calling an end to that was challenging, but I guess there was some relief that came with that of knowing that, I'm going to regain some of my time back, spend some more time with my family. And, a lot of the sacrifice when you watch your daughter grow up, when you're spending so much time away, it goes by quick. So I think there was some happiness that came along with kind of the sadness. But as far as my day to day, of what I do for High Limit, Silver Dollar, now NARC. I think I'm more busy probably. This is the busiest time in the off season when you're setting, kind of the schedules up and getting everything dialed for the next year and also closing out this year for High Limit, and going through all that stuff. So yeah, I would say day to day right now, just kind of settling into probably what more will, I guess, be my standard days. I'll be at home a lot more and be working kind of in my makeshift office here. And then, I'll obviously, still race. So when you say retired, it's just retired from full time, and what that looks like, I don't know. So that's kind of exciting as well. That there's some newness, new racing adventures on the horizon for me. So yeah, I got a lot of change and excitement in my life, and just been kind of grinding it out and working hard.
I want to start kind of first just with driving things and kind of this final season. But is there a moment during the season where you were like, yes, this is the right decision and I'm done? Or was it something that kind of just slowly built over time?
I would say it was on my mind and building over time, but it's like the last 2 or 3 years. It's like I always say oh, I could do one more year. You always kind of get to that point. And when you have a lot of success, it's hard to know when to walk away. I think you can, just, whether you're happy or not, when things are going well, and you're performing at a high level, you don't want to stop. And, six straight championships in a row, and then I think this year with the change, changing of the teams, kind of, working with a lot of new people, and then just ramping up high limit, silver dollar, not being able to be as part of silver dollars as much as I wanted to be. And then I think really when it started to ramp up for me was the injury at Eldora was just a little bit eye opening as far as just, and also the other injuries at Eldora, not just my own. I think just when you kind of have the success I've had, and then you have the family that you have, at what point, is it worth the risk? I love sprint car racing. I want to make it safer, but you can't not acknowledge that there's some dangers that go along with driving these cars. And, I really want to be a dad for my daughter, and I want to be around a lot more for her. And, so I think it ramped in, and then towards the end of the year, just never could get into a place where I was enjoying it as much as I knew I needed to be, and motivated as much as I know I needed to be. And, the good nights were no different than the bad nights emotionally for me. So I think just some of it just had gotten to a point where I just was in a place where I was just doing it to do it. And I don't think you need to be out there racing these guys when you're doing it to just do it. And, so I think about Skagit's when I finally really made the call with Casey that like, hey, it's time. Like, I'm not racing next year. You better start, looking for a driver, and we better talk to Napa and make sure we get, everything, ready for next year. Cause that was important to me, is making sure I didn't leave Casey high and dry and Napa high and dry. And I really wanted, that team to continue, moving forward and have success into the future. They really did a lot with us at high limit, and Napa has been behind me for, 8 years now, and really wanted the next driver to fit in there and them to go have success. So yeah, Skagit was the time that we made the call, and the rest progressed from there.
I feel like one of the things that I knew for myself when my NASCAR career kind of came to an end is I would get to the end of the season and I wouldn't feel that same kind of want to be at the racetrack. And I would almost go into a depression when the season was over. I was like, oh, I just really want to be at the track. And I started having like less fun. And I'm wondering if you were kind of in that same place where it was just like, it just wasn't as fun anymore. You weren't kind of looking forward to going to the track as much, and maybe a reset is the right thing. And I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, it's a good analogy for sure. You could call it a reset. For me, I think, just there's so much time consumed by travel and going to the race. It's not necessarily the driving of the car that takes up, the majority of the time. It would be getting on the planes on Thursday, going to where, and then spending a week on the road, and I've been doing it for a long time. And then I think when I'd come home, it used to be that I was just home to, be home, and had 100% of my time went to family time. Well, now, you come home and then you have a full-time job working on, all this stuff behind the scenes. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to walk away at the end of the year, whatever year I decided, on my own terms. I think that was really important to me, watching a lot of the generations before me and drivers become kind of miserable before they would walk away, and doing it longer than they wanted to be doing it for financial reasons and, other reasons. So I think I kind of had it in my mind that I would race full time till I'm 40, and I'm turning 40 in December. And, just the injury at Eldora, and just the lack of motivation, the lack of enjoyment. Like I said, the highs and the lows, there was not much different. If I won or I didn't win, it didn't feel that much different to me. So yeah, I think there's a lot of factors like that, like you say, and just kind of, you got to be able to kind of recognize that and make that decision and that call. It's a tough call. It's not the same for everybody, and it's hard for fans probably from the outside looking in to understand. It always looks like a glorious life driving a race car and making a living at it. And it is, there's a lot of great things, but there's a lot of sacrifice that comes with that, a lot of risk that comes with that. And if you can recognize it and know when it's your time to maybe, take that step back, I think that's important to me. And it's important that these young guys coming up, get their shot now. So I was happy to step away and happy for Dazen to step in there, and it allows me to pick and choose some races, of what I'm going to do into the future, and go to places that I enjoy going to, and take control back some of the time that I needed to have back.
To me, kind of having been around for your kind of entire journey, like watching you go from kind of part-time at KKR to then winning 6 championships in a row, it was like really like a Brad Sweet era. And I'm wondering now, as you kind of are at least a few weeks away from it, like how do you look back on the last kind of 10 years, and have you thought about, I know legacy is a weird word, but have you thought about your legacy and your place in the sport, knowing that you're going to end up as like one of the greatest drivers of all time?
Yeah, I don't think when you're doing it you recognize it, and I think that's some of the challenges. Like, to race at a high level is a lot different than a lot of the guys that just go and race and enjoy being there. When you race for championships, it's every night is way more intense than anybody realizes, and that just builds over time when you're doing that year after year. It's just, you never get comfortable. You got to work twice as hard as everybody else to stay on top of the mountain. Everybody's coming for you, and yeah, I think it made the time go by quick, and I think by the end I was burnt out and ready to be done full time. So maybe now I can reflect a little bit, but it's interesting. I never did anything for like accolades or legacies, or I've never really thought much about any of that stuff. I did it to provide for my family. That was always what was on my mind, was want to give the best life to my family, and I did that. I wanted to be 100% at the best that I could possibly be, and I had to work hard at it, with training and all the stuff behind the scenes that people don't know about. But I can look back and be proud that I did all that. But I get really excited to look forward and think about everything I learned. Now I can take and hopefully use my influence, use my knowledge to help drive the sport to the next level. And if you're talking about legacy, I think that's honestly kind of a cooler legacy to me than like some winning some races and some championships. Would be like, how did I become this kid that like came from not a lot, accomplished this, but how did I then take the whole sport that we all love and that we're passionate about to the next level? And I think that's a cool legacy and gets me excited. Maybe when I'm older, we'll look back at my whole body of work, and all the people that helped me accomplish that. But yeah, right now it's kind of like that chapter's over. I'm excited for it, but I'm also like really excited that what we're accomplishing with High Limit, and learning about promoting and the events, and just there's so much that goes on behind the scenes to make all this happen. So really excited for the future, and proud of the past right now, but maybe it still hasn't sank in all the way.
You, to me, were kind of like the ultimate, championship racer. You were super consistent. You got, the program was buttoned up. And I'm wondering, like, as we kind of look at some of these other drivers, and kind of how aggressive racing has gotten, like, was that like a conscious choice that you made? And on a night where maybe you could have won if you took a couple more risks, you're like, okay, no, we're going to run third here because that makes more sense to me. Like, are those choices you make behind the wheel? Is that stuff you think about, or is it you're just kind of balls to the walls all the time?
No, I definitely think to become a championship caliber driver, that's a different type of driver. And to be able to run at, a 90 to 80%, pick and choose your battles, in the heat of those moments, it's deferred gratification. There's a lot of mental things that come with, being mentally strong through those situations. And yeah, you definitely pick and choose the battles, and maybe the line a certain night was a little too risky for to win the race, was too risky for the overall big picture of trying to win the championship. So there was a lot of those nights that you would just take your thirds and your fifths, and we got really good at that. I feel like we got incredibly good at that, and I think what you're seeing with David and Rico's getting better at it too. What you see at David with the World of Outlaws right now, he's in that position where he gets really hard to beat because he's so consistent in picking and choosing those battles. And I've heard him made comments, similar to what you just said. It's like it's different racing for a championship than racing for nightly wins, and especially for guys that aren't in the points at all, that just show up and race, and they don't understand, what it's like to be in that situation, where you have a lot. I guess bigger picture that you're looking at and a lot more pressure. And so, sometimes those situations are tough to deal with, but yeah, it was something that we got good at. We definitely very proud of that part of our program is, when we get a lead, we'd get really hard to beat for sure. And, those last few years were definitely grueling right to the end. And that's, they're definitely tough challenges to win those championships nowadays.
One of the things I feel like we don't ask drivers enough about is what you think about the other drivers. And like one of the things I think it's really telling about how good a guy is if somebody else says he's really good. So I'm curious for you, whether it's high limit, outlaws, regional stuff, California, like who are those drivers that you look around the country and you're like, I'm a big fan of that guy. Like he's really good. Are there like a couple of guys that you look at that you're a big fan of?
Yeah. I mean, that's a very cool, interesting question. Drivers, as you're young, you never want to acknowledge or give credit to any drivers. But as I've gotten older and, obviously in the role I'm in, it's hard for me to really, I don't want to leave a bunch of drivers out. But certainly have to acknowledge, a couple of the drivers. I think what Rico accomplished this year and how hard he works at it. It reminds me a lot of how I did things. Just how into it he pushes himself, physically outside of the car to be better in the car. How much he studies film. He's a student of the sport, and now it's paying off for him. So I'm a huge fan of how Rico's doing it, what he's doing, and what he's built with his team, and that's really cool. I think David was nipping at my heels. David Gravel was nipping at my heels right when I left. Me and David have had similarities in our careers. He's done it a little different, but same amount of time kind of when he came on the scene and I came on the scene, and we had a lot of respect for each other and a lot of great battles. David is an exceptional qualifier. His ability to drive a looser race car and still go quick time night in and night out's amazing to me. And then, as a racer, because he's in those positions, he's a great restarter. He just doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and he's come a long way. And those are the two guys at the very top, I think, of sprint car racing. There's so many other guys that I think are coming on strong and doing a good job. I think Aaron Reitz will surprise me a little bit this year. We weren't sure how he would be, but as a driver kind of slash mechanic, makes a lot of decisions on his own car. He had a ton of speed this year, and yeah, he was, capable of winning, anywhere. And I thought he was really, really impressive. On the other side, Buddy and Carson, I think they're Buddy really took the leap this year to becoming a elite sprint car driver. So that was impressive for him. Carson, I think, is, if they just get the program right, Carson's capable as a driver. I think he puts the work in behind the scenes and really wants to be a champion someday. So, just proud of everyone. Honestly, High Limit, our drivers, it was unique this year because like a guy like Tanner Thorson, who you see working on his own stuff in the pits and doing it different than everybody, for him to win races, and rookies like Jason Persley it's just the storylines, go up and down the pits, and just I see how hard everybody works and is grinding out, and the competition level, how high it is. So there's a lot of great storylines, great drivers, great teams, and a lot of respect in the pit areas. And I think it's set up for some more exciting racing in 2026 for sure.
The last thing I want to ask you about, like kind of in terms of driving stuff, is, we've seen some crew chief movement. Obviously, Rico seems like he got unlocked with Ricky Warner coming over. You had all that success with Eric Prutzman. Are we at a point where you have to have that guy as crew chief to like really win a lot of races and contend for a championship? Or do you think there is still the opportunity for someone like Reitzel or, a guy who's maybe calling more of those shots to contend and maybe kind of carry some more of that weight? Like, what do you think there?
I think it's just a matter of hitting on all the right packages. It's obviously easier with two knowledgeable people. What you see with Ricky is just straight up knowledge and experience, and then Rico putting in a huge effort on his end to get better and be that driver, and you're seeing success. But what you see with like Aaron Reitzel is if he gets it right, Aaron Reitzel could go win 20 races because he's aggressive, he's a good driver, and he's smart with his race car. And you saw it a couple years ago with Brent Marks when they got it right. He was really good at pretty much every race he went to, and you see Brent probably trying to figure out his program, moving some things around right now, and it's just you're just constantly trying to find that needle in that haystack and make your window wide enough that throughout each night, as long as you're not doing anything too crazy, your car can operate. And you see the tires and things changing, and sometimes it's easy to get it off just a little bit and not get yourself back in that window. And with two people, someone really knowledgeable watching, and then a driver that's got a lot of experience, it seems easier to get back on track. I think that's what Eric and I had. That Ty and I were, had to grow into. It would have taken a few years to do. It's just Eric knew, based off some of my body language and what I was saying, he had his ideas of which way to take the car, and vice versa. We could support each other, and two heads coming together, was better for us. So I'm not going to say that there's a right or a wrong way. Experience and knowledge is everything. It's really hard to do it, as a rookie or a younger guy. And so that's probably why it's impressive how quick Buddy's gotten to where he's gotten. Obviously, they hit a great package with his crew chief this year, Dylan, and you just don't know what's going to change from year to year. There's a lot of variables that seem to come into play, whether it be tires or wing rules or other rules packages, and so it just comes down to using that experience and that knowledge and two people just getting it right. And you've seen it over the years. I remember when Tim Schaefer and Brian Kimenoff got it right that year with that 83 car, with Goodyears, and that was an impressive season. And but then the stuff that they were doing didn't work the next year, and you've seen stuff like that happen, through the course of, my life and career, that, it's really hard to get it right year after year after year and stay on top. And I think that's what makes Ricky Warner, the absolute best. He's incredible, and he's obsessed with it. And that's why they have so much success is the experience and what he brings to the table, for sure.
Jumping over to High Limit, now that we're kind of 2 years into, the full kind of meal deal, after these 2 years, I kind of want to know both sides of this, but like, what are you really happy with through 2 years? And then I want to know what you don't like, what you need to improve on for High Limit, like after these 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first 2 years is a ton of learning, a lot of just gaining knowledge and data on everything. I mean, there's not one specific thing. I think I'm proud that we've been able to, participate in so many great events and entertain so many fans and promote our own events, and whether they're joint ventures or leasing tracks, and, entrusted with doing events at Eldora and Port Royal and doing the Gold Cup and doing some really large scale events with a lot of pressure and doing a great job at it, being on Fox Sports 1 Live. The staff we've been able to kind of put together, second to none. A lot of passionate, individuals that all are coming together to create one common goal, and that's to grow sprint car racing and to grow our brand. And so I mean, I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of what we've learned, some of the corrections we've made, just being innovative, being efficient. I feel like we get a lot of people compare themselves to us, and as newbies, that's kind of exciting, and gratifying that we're, maybe setting the tone on what a dirt track event should look like, or a night at the racetrack with, running an efficient program and making sure the fans get to meet their drivers, and all that stuff's very, very important to us. I think some of the pain points, just going to some racetracks that maybe aren't as up to par as we'd want them to be on the safety side or just the product side of the racing. I think there's some of that still going on that we need to keep cleaning up. I wish that maybe some of the bigger events had all the best drivers at them, where we're a little bit divided right now in the industry. I think that robs the fans a little bit, and it'd be kind of wouldn't be right to not acknowledge that. So there's that, a couple things, and just I don't know, just want to keep learning, keep being innovative, and I think for the most part, everything's going better than expected, and there's nothing that really is jumping off the page that I think's bad or unhealthy, and or hurting sprint car racing. And I think that's the most important thing. As long as we're all in it together to grow sprint car racing, I think that's the key goal.
One of the things that I've been interested in here the last couple of weeks is as we watch the schedules come out is your guys' schedule is a little bit different. The Outlaws is probably going to be pretty similar. Lucas on the late model side is really similar. And I'm wondering like and I've had this conversation with a few people that I know kind of in dirt racing, but what is the responsibility of the series when it comes to new tracks or changing the schedule every year? Like a little bit, I feel like there's an argument to be made for like, if you find those events that work, you find that core of the schedule that you kind of stick with it because you can make money at those places, that the fans will show up, that you get good streaming audiences. And like, a lot of regions of the country have been tried, a lot of racetracks have been tried, and there are good reasons why, those tracks don't appear on schedules. But in terms of trying to grow the sport or get into new markets, like what is the responsibility of the series to try to change up the schedule every year versus, finding what works and sticking with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a balance between, supply and demand. Ultimately, you got to go off your gut, what your gut tells you as far as it's a business, and you make every decision you make at the end of the day is a business decision. It's to grow the sport, to grow your brand. And if a market's oversaturated, that doesn't do good for anybody. And if we're going to markets that you're not going to have enough fans to pay the purse or to be financially successful, then that's not good for anybody either. So there is some of that learning that you kind of referred to in the last question. Is we've definitely, I think, oversaturated some markets or gone to some markets that we thought we'd do better at and just weren't prepared for a national touring sprint car event. And you see us obviously not go back or change course and do something different. And I think we're still starting to sort all that out. I'm really proud of our schedule this year. I think we're going to some great markets. We're spread out. We're hitting Las Vegas. We're in Arizona. We went back to Montana. We have an event in Washington. We're in Oregon. We have great events in California. We're spread out into New York and Pennsylvania, Ohio. Like there's a lot of balancing. It's just not very simple logistics to put a whole schedule together that actually makes sense for promoters, for other series in the area, plus our teams. And it's a balancing act to try to figure all that out. So I'm proud of where we're at. I guess to answer your question, I think ultimately you just have to try to go to as many markets as you can to try to showcase the product to as many fans as you possibly can, as long as you feel like it can be financially viable for both the teams, the promoters, and the fans. And so there's a giant ecosystem. It has to work for everybody. And I do think it's important to have your stable events, and I think there is some equity built into just having common dates year after year, even if it's not a big event. If you find one that works, Eagle's a good example for us. Every year it's on a Tuesday in early June, and that date's worked really well. I don't see why we would want to ever change that. And if you find those dates that work, you want to keep those stables, but there's also always going to be a part of your schedule that's going to stay liquid and moving around, at least for the foreseeable future.
The franchise stuff has obviously been something that's been talked about here a lot lately. I've covered it. Jeremy's covered it. One of the questions that I see come up the most often is, where's all this money coming from? And I've tried to explain it. I know other people have tried to explain it. Will you just say, like, here's where this money is coming from so that they hear it from you?
Yeah, just I have a big pot of money. I'm just, no, it's, and honestly, yeah, I've heard this question too. I think it, if you look at a lot of other major sports, you could ask that same question, especially if you saw, not a ton of people in the grandstands or something. You're going, what? How can they pay these players in baseball millions and millions of dollars? Or, it's just there's a whole nother aspect that wasn't a part of this business, 10 years ago or maybe even 5 years ago with now streaming. It's there's a media rights that is paid to us by Flow based off of viewership, and that revenue is a huge part of our business, and it's distributed, to the teams fairly. We still have to sell tickets. We still have to entertain the fans in the stands. That's still a huge part of our business. So, I think, the money is, to answer the question, is it's an overall big picture of the business, but probably what's surprising to people is how big of a part of the business streaming has become, and how many thousands of fans that aren't at the track are watching, on a nightly basis. And that's just similar to other professional sports. And, was a major challenge for sprint car racing was, how do we show this product? Because live TV is very tough. So how do you show the product? Well, streaming is obviously our solution. And, when we run in the middle of the week and we run on off days and things throughout the summer, our viewership can be pretty substantial, as you saw with the Fox Sports 1 numbers. So, I think if people did basic math, they could see, where the revenue is coming from.
One of the things that I've always wondered, and I want to ask you about the TV stuff, but like in terms of the streaming, when we watch other major sporting, organizations have media rights, like it's two parties, they're negotiating, that, try to get to some common ground. Knowing that Flow is like a partner in the business, like, are you able to get like what you need from those streaming deals? Like it feels a little bit like you're negotiating against yourselves. And is that, you don't have to give me details, but like, how do you kind of approach that stuff? Are those conversations you guys have had kind of, especially like when you were maybe setting this thing up, that, about how that all goes?
Well, I think when you're starting something from scratch, nobody knows what the value is going to be. But Flow was the perfect partner for us to start. Obviously, having an established racing, subscription base, so that we could fire off and have, good viewership numbers and things was important. And their investment into, short track racing is very obvious to anybody that's paying attention. They're very serious about growing grassroots racing. It's important to their business. It's important for, all these different series. And obviously that we're partners on the, high limit series. So I think initially it's a perfect partner. Down the road, I think as we grow our audience and stuff like that, you never know where all this could go. And I don't think that, it's still in Flow's best interest for us to run the most profitable company that we can run. So if Flow's not the right partner way down the road or something, I don't think that that's a conversation that can't be had and that wouldn't be had. I think it's something that, that's just not our focus right now. Our focus is, our partnership with Flow, helping grow the audience, the subscription base, to provide the content. And we know if we're growing our audience and Flow's, gaining subscribers because of us, our value is only going to go up. Those make those negotiations that much easier. The value of your, of your rights fee comes based off of how your viewership looks. And so that's why, I think you see such huge rights fees in some of these other professional sports, is they know how many people are going to be tuned in or how many subscribers they're going to gain. And, if we can grow our audience to the next level, then, it's only going to be that much more money that will be able to be injected into the sport and help build it to the next level. So we know it's really important part of the business to gain subscribers and keep growing that subscription base and keep showcasing that product the best way that we possibly can, to that audience.
Where do you see live TV fitting in? Like, we know World Racing Group with the Outlaws doesn't really do live TV anymore. They've got their tape delayed stuff. You guys did the FS1 show this year. Do you think we get to a point where there are more races on TV? Do you think it's necessary even that these races need to be on TV, or do you think the future is just kind of streaming more, maybe like an MMA wrestling setup where, where things are kind of behind a paywall? Like, how do you view those things?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't think we know the complete answer, but I certainly think it opens us up to grow our audience when we do go to Fox Sports One. So I don't think every race should be on Fox Sports One by any means. I think it's a huge challenge to put our sports on live TV, our sport on live TV, because of just the format that we have, hot laps, qualifying, and then the unknowns and variables that happen at a dirt track on a nightly basis. But I think if there's an opportunity to do 5 or 10 live shows a year to help showcase the product and create awareness to maybe get fans to get excited and buy a subscription, then I think it's well worth having that relationship and utilizing that opportunity to have good events on live TV that's not behind a paywall. So I don't know what the future would look like. I mean, if that was the direction that got the most attention and created the most gains for the sport, then we'd obviously have to go more towards that type of product. But my gut says the streaming is the right way, and that's kind of where a lot of everything's going anyway, which is kind of lucky for us, I think. When NASCAR is now on streaming and NFL's on Amazon Prime, and you see a lot of other sports going that direction, I think that's good. I think the consumer now just wants to go watch what they want to watch. They don't want to have a giant TV package. They have a couple streaming services that provide exactly the entertainment they want to watch, or they go to YouTube or other things. So I think as we create awareness and get more subscribers tuned in, we're in a perfect opportunity to have a really cool product that can grow immensely on a hopefully one of these streaming platforms work out into the future. Whether it's Flow or something else, we don't know. Obviously we'll just keep doing the best we can to showcase the product.
When you talk about growing sprint car racing, do you have like a vision in mind of where you're trying to get to? Like, are there other sports you look at that you think are attainable? And I guess I'm wondering, like, what do you think is like really possible for the growth of sprint car racing over the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever?
I mean, obviously I'm very bullish on sprint car racing, and believe that our product is second to none because I find it so entertaining, and I felt like that we just haven't showcased the product in the best possible way over the last 20 years or whatnot. And I think we've stunted our own growth a little bit, but I don't think we have like the perfect answer to say like, oh, here's we want to just keep growing it and basically take it from it being viewed as a hobby for a bunch of rich car owners to a sustainable professional business that puts on really professional events, showcases the talents of these drivers, and entertains fans across the country, but at more large scale events at nicer venues. And I kind of look at like this as an opportunity to professionalize the sport. And so I think it's important to establish bigger events, 2 and 3 day events more often. They're more valuable for the fans. I think it's easier to entertain the fans, more exciting for them. I think it's better for the race teams. I think it's better for the drivers, and you're definitely seeing that direction. So I don't think we're like way far off, but there's still some confusion and there's still a lot of dilution, and the pie gets spread out maybe in ways that don't help us grow the sport. So I think we'll figure that out. I think in the next few years it'll all start to kind of figure itself out, and you can kind of see the direction that we're taking the sport and that we believe in. And ultimately you just never know what's in front of us. So we'll always be willing to pivot and do whatever we got to do to try to grow the sport in the right direction that works for the whole ecosystem. I think that's important.
The moves you made this year with, obviously we kind of knew the franchise stuff was going to be what it is. But like the stuff here more recently where your package comes out about for the non-franchise teams, it very much looked to me like you're star hunting there. Like you're trying to go grab a Carson Macedo or convince a Logan Schuchart to kind of come that way. And I'm curious, is that the correct way that I'm thinking about that? And then on top of that, going forward, we know that this is the plan for the next 2 years, but like, have you guys talked about what that non-franchise situation looks like kind of beyond that? So you can maybe continue kind of backfilling, maybe towards the bottom end of the roster?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're, with the high roller club, we're trying to create something that's capitalism meets socialism. I think is the best way to put it. It's something that's not super top heavy, but it's good for the whole group. And so the non, the Joker's Fund, I think is something that, yes, it can be intriguing to a star, a mid tier team, or even a lower team. I think that was important to us. Is similar to our high roller club that's good from top to bottom. Is we wanted to put something out that makes sense for everybody, because not everybody's going to win the championship, and there are teams that are trying to get off the ground and get out on the road. So we didn't want to have barriers up that they couldn't participate, and we wanted to put enough money up that it incentivized a good team to want to come. And when I say good team, meaning a team that is in that top tier that could compete for a championship on either side. We wanted to put enough money for a mid-tier team, meaning a say fourth to eighth place team, and some good performance thresholds and incentives, and then we wanted to have something that still took care of the teams that maybe aren't at that level yet. So I think what we put out was a nice balance between all those different things. I think it kind of aligned with what we were trying to do with our high roller club, and I think what we put out for the Joker's Fund is a nice balancing act with some cool thresholds, that incentivize performance and reward certain performance levels, and then also having the winners bonus pool is a cool addition. After these 2 years, I'm kind of hopeful that we'll have some of these the high roller club filled up, but we don't really know exactly the answers of what's going to take place. I think both sides probably look at 14 or 15 being the threshold of what you can kind of support, and that's not because we can't support them with tow money and point fund or our high roller club. I think it's just the purse money starts to is a big part of this, and I think it starts to fall off for a percentage of the teams if you start to get too many cars. It starts to dilute that purse money too much, and there's always going to be two or three that just don't make it, because that is a big part of the business, getting that nightly money. So I guess to answer your question in the short term, I think what we put out was really good for the next couple of years, and then also our high roller club. I think into the future you can see we've never really had that in sprint car racing before, where we're putting out monies that are out in front of us 4 and 5 years, which I think that helps these car owners understand where we're going. It shows them, I guess our strategy and our plan, and, light at the end of the tunnel for them. And they can plan around those revenues, based off where they think they're going to be on a 2-year running average. So it's exciting to be innovative and creative on how we, disperse those monies. And, into the future, we'll kind of, I'm sure have to tweak a few things with the system, because it is new and it's a new idea. So, I don't know. We're certainly not going to want barriers up, and we're certainly going to want the best teams that we can all have come together to showcase, the product and to the fans. So we don't know exactly what that'll look like in 3 or 4 years, but I certainly think a lot's going to change from now till then.
One of the criticisms, obviously, that you hear about this is that it's going to kind of create a walled garden where it's like you're going to have your 10 teams and nobody else is going to be kind of allowed in. Like, what is your response to that criticism?
Well, I think that's why we put that Joker's Fund out, obviously, for the next 2 years to kind of showcase, at some point you gotta bet on the people, right? The people are, you got to believe in the vision, and we're, Kyle, myself, and Flo want to take, high limit racing. So you got to either believe in it, or, be betting on us, or, you got to be willing to potentially buy in, down the road. And, I think we'll always have a way for a non high roller club or non franchise team, however you want to say it, to participate. You just don't know where the revenues, what those revenues will look like, based off of what growth. But so we wanted to put something out that was still for 15 cars. So I think those revenues, you'll see it will still support 15 cars, whether 12 have franchises and 3 don't, or 15 do and 0 don't. I think that's kind of the threshold that we're at. So we'll probably just have to make those tweaks based off of what actually happens in the next, 24, 36 months.
In terms of the kind of on track, at track product, are there going to be changes next year, or do you expect, kind of the same things? Choose cone, the wheel, all of those things. Are there other things coming, or are you kind of like in a happy place there?
Yeah, I think we're certainly like open to new innovation and new ideas, but also, I think where we got to is a pretty decent spot for fan engagement, for efficiency of run of show. Um, I wouldn't mind running with what we have for a year. And unless something was to drastically change that we needed to make a change. But for now, I think what we have is exciting for the fans. I think the Fan Fest has turned out to be a really cool addition to our shows. It allows the kids to really get up close with their drivers, early in the night, and that's been really cool to see. It's been a success. Our start time, we've been within 3 to 4 minutes of our 7:30 heat race start time almost every night, and our end time, is between that 9:15 and 9:30 window. So it's a kind of 2 hours of entertainment is our goal, and hot laps and qualifying is for the diehard fan to be there to watch and watch online as well. But we have that break that kind of buffers, I guess, our start time. It allows us to, if we get too far behind hot laps and qualifying, we can scrap Fan Fest if we need to. But for the most part, we've been pretty good. 85-90% of the time we're right on time. We have a 15 to 20 minute Fan Fest, and we start our races right on time and run a really efficient show. So I've been really proud of that. We have the dice roll that allows a fan to participate to try to win some extra money. I think that's great. I think the questions that we ask the drivers are more about them individually to showcase who these drivers are. The wheel's been a fun hit. It's, at times probably drags on a little bit with the spinning of it, but for the most part, we hear a lot of positive feedback from the fans on that. So, yeah, I mean, we're always talking internally about, what we can improve upon and where we can be innovative. So I wouldn't be surprised if we make a few tweaks, but I've been pretty happy with where we're at right now.
In terms of the rules package, we saw High Limit kind of diverge a little bit this year with some of the things they did, and the World of Outlaws obviously just came out with a rules bulletin for next year with tail tanks and some different things, body work. And on top of that, there's been kind of some interesting rumors out there about tires and different tire companies. Do you foresee there kind of continuing to be divergence between the two series in terms of rules, or is your hope that they stay more similar?
I think right now they're going to stay more similar. I think the rules that were different last year didn't really affect anything, and we kind of thought that would be the case. That's why we didn't maybe view that as a big deal, where I think a lot of other people maybe did. But I think the tire pumps we viewed as, if there's some innovation there, we feel like that could be a safer thing. As the tires get hot and then you get long reds and long yellows, you lose tire pressure. To me, that's a safety thing. But a lot of the guys and a lot of people that complained have never sat in these cars and driven in these corners with 5 or 6 pounds in their right rear. And so, that was a way potentially to mitigate some of that. And, to me, anytime you can make innovation and safety, I feel like it's worth it. The shock adjuster, I felt like, was just, we're getting to a point where we're getting maybe a little too much parity with one right rear tire, flat top wings, just trying to give a little bit of something for the drivers to have as a tool besides a wing slider. Maybe they can make an adjustment under a yellow or red, or make their car better, create some passing or something. And, instead of just being kind of stuck with what you got. So, as far as that, I think with the wheel cover stuff, I think that is totally a safety thing. And we've definitely heard it from the racetracks that we just can't afford the wheel covers flying into the grandstand. So they felt like the Zeus ones flew off a lot more than the bolted ones. They have a lot more liability than anybody else. So if that's the direction that the racetracks want to go, we're certainly behind them, especially when it's Eldora and Knoxville kind of wanting that to happen. Then you have to listen. So we support that. The tail tanks is an interesting one. I've heard a lot of people say like you could hold the tail tanks on with 4 bolts, and I definitely agree you could. But the manufacturers didn't really want to take the inserts out or change the way that they built their tanks. So I think it was time for the industry to at least acknowledge that we needed to keep the tanks on the cars. We don't need them flying off or going in the grandstands, or it's when they come loose, it seemed like they were really puncturing and things were happening. So and maybe it's not the best answer, but I thought adding 2 more bolts and not really saying exactly how they had to do it was pretty open-minded on kind of putting it in the team's hands to figure out how to, whether they just run 2 plates or whatever they do. We know that good teams could do it with 4 if they really wanted to, but a retrofit with 2 more and then using the 4 existing inserts kind of was I think a fair way that the Outlaws ultimately came up with that rule, and we support that one. So I don't think past that, I don't think the tires are going to change from anything that I've heard. Not saying that we don't want them to change.
I did hear you were one of the drivers that tested.
Yeah, so we tested tires, and we've definitely learned some stuff that I thought that Hoosier would probably implement in 2026, but there's a lot of logistics that go into tire changes from regional and local distributors and manufacturing processes and cost associations. So hopefully, I'm hoping that Hoosier continues to learn and innovate, and keeps safety and keeps the product in mind as far as entertainment value and things like that. And I think they ultimately will. But I think I thought they would probably make the change this year. I think it's probably a year out, maybe. So we'll see. There's a lot on the tire front that could change in the next couple of years. I know American Racer, has made a push to, be involved in the sport. They're involved in Australia, kind of dual manufacturers. So, that might be a direction the sport goes into the future, is opening that back up, but not really sure. You don't, until you really have the big races, the Knoxville Nationals or the Kings Royals, those are the events that kind of control kind of the rules packages. And right now, World Racing Group kind of has those events, and we want our drivers to be as competitive as possible. So we certainly don't want to get our rules package too far off, and we certainly want to stay aligned with the rest of the country, on the rules, so that all cars can participate in every event. It makes a lot more sense for promoters and for race fans, and for the race teams.
In terms of your situation, obviously, we've got 2 competing national tours right now. We know things haven't been super great through some of this. I'm curious right now, like what the relationship is between the 2 sides, how much conversation happens. Have you spoken to Brian Carter? Like, I know you've been photographed talking to Carlton, but like, what is that relationship right now?
Yeah, I mean, Carlton and I have a relationship. It's definitely not a relationship where we dislike each other. At least I don't dislike him. We can call and talk about an event or a race that's getting scheduled in an area. Tom Devitt's talked with Mike Hess regarding rules and things like that. I think it's getting better. Maybe I've never had I haven't had a conversation with Brian Carter about any of this stuff, but I'm never opposed to it. I think when you're new and viewed as a threat, and what kind of how this all happened, I'm sure there's a little animosity and some just dislike about how we've created high limit and how we've kind of came on the scene. So I don't really hold any grudges or anything like that. I think we're both love sprint car racing, and ultimately both want to grow sprint car racing. And ultimately, it's in our best interest that World Racing Group or World of Outlaws holds great events, and it's in their best interest that we hold great events, because a lot of fans don't really care. They're just there to see a sprint car race, and so if we do a bad job, ultimately it probably could hurt a fan from being a becoming a sprint car fan, and that ultimately hurts them, and vice versa. If they hold a bad event and it's not exciting for the fans, and we lose a potential of gaining the fans. So I think we're both in it together, whether we acknowledge it or not, or you know want it to be this way. We're in it together, and we both will gain if the sport grows. And I think the fans have shown that there's enough room for both of us. Based off of what we see crowd wise for them and for us, and obviously the teams. There's enough teams to support both. If anything, there's almost too many now. So I think that's a positive thing, and you're seeing flow in both Dirt Vision, hosting great events and thriving. So, I don't know what the future holds, but I certainly think the industry needed some competition, and I think we push them, and they push us, and ultimately that's a win for the fans and for the race teams.
I got a few more questions. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but will you be at all of the high limit shows?
I will not be at all the high limit shows. I'm going to focus a little bit more on family, a little more on Silver Dollar. I still want to race some races, so putting this together a schedule that's probably between 25 and 30 races with a team that's TBD. So that'll be something different for me. And then, but yeah, I think the team we have at High Limit, by the end, when I'm just racing, I don't want to micromanage them, and they're really good at what they do. Mike Hess is a great race director, and the staff he has, and then you have Kendra on the marketing side, JP and Andy. It's a great group across the board, and I certainly want to be there to help when I can help, and steer the ship and do a lot of this back end stuff, but on a nightly basis, I think they'll continue to do a great job, and we'll continue to debrief and, after the events, and plan and execute, events moving forward. And, so I think this will definitely be a difference for me. I'll certainly be, tuned in when I'm not there, and definitely very engaged and very involved with every aspect, just maybe not physically present at every race.
I solicited some questions from some of my kind of show supporters, and kind of along this line, Carl wanted to know if the races that you're at, you're going to still bring your gear bag, like just in case there's an opportunity for you to race.
No, those days of just jumping in cars, are over. It's never been easy for me. I'm a little bit on the shorter side, so like if an A-frame's moved back, or the seat bars aren't in the right spots, the spacers I have to use are way too big and kind of gets sketchy, and a lot of cars are made that way. And nowadays with the chasms and things so specialized and fitted for just individual drivers, like I'll definitely be picky, and when I go to the races, I'll make sure my seat's in right, and I'm very comfortable in the situation that I'm in.
With the NARC stuff, I actually had a question from Ryan, and it's one of the things I wanted to hear you kind of talk about a little bit. But he says, with the NARC acquisition, do you see further steps for kind of your organization to help stabilize regional series? It seems like High Limit is set up to grow themselves and regional series with maybe like a NASCAR style weekly series. Do you see something like that?
I think the regional racing is very important in certain regions, and not only for our racetrack to have success on the West Coast, but for High Limit to have success and Gold Cup. You need strong regional series, and with the All Stars and what Rich Farmer's done with them, and what we've been kind of able to build together there, and now NARC with Kevin Radine and myself, really hopeful that we can kind of stabilize the class and grow the class a little bit. 410 racing, it's only going to benefit what Kevin and I are doing out here, and what High Limit, when it comes through, it just makes it more competitive. But also just, our racetracks, we have, large scale NARC events. We have the Mini Gold Cup. We have the David Tartar race. We now have the Dave Bradway Jr. Memorial. We'll be at Chico this year. So we definitely have some events that are NARC, and Kevin Rudine has Dirt Cup, and some other events that are NARC as well. So it's in our best interest to have a strong 410 class on the West Coast. So we're definitely putting some resources towards that, and it's definitely important for the ecosystem. And I could foresee something growing into some more strong regional programs that help work directly with high limit and what we're trying to build for the overall big picture.
Where are you at right now with NARC? I know you're probably working on schedule and all that type of stuff. And when do you kind of
Yeah.
foresee that coming out? And do you expect kind of big changes for that series?
Well, we named Scott Woodhouse kind of series director, race director. So he's going to kind of take the lead on the day to day operations, which is great. He's got a lot of experience out here on the West Coast, and I think he'll do a good job. And then, just I think just some newness, new ideas, some things that we've learned with high limit, we can implement. And just using Kevin and I's resources, our relationships with Flow, sponsors, things like that, we can, hopefully bump everything up a little bit. And like you said, yeah, just putting a schedule together right now, which Reno's in 2 weeks or a week and a half, and Reno is the promoters workshop for the whole West Coast. So a lot of everything gets finalized there, and that's probably when we'll be in a position to put stuff out. We're still obviously waiting to see what the Outlaws schedule is coming out here. That kind of directly affects NARC. So we'll see if they're going to run those last 2 weekends of September and where they're going to be.
Jolene wanted to know, there are times, especially in central Pennsylvania, that the big cat hears from the other side of the supporters, even in Victory Lane. Does Brad see the same detractors being as vocal to him as a series owner?
Hold on, explain the question again. Does what?
So I think she's asking you about when you get booed or something like that, like in Central PA, those kind of people that are like against you a little bit, like, and do you kind of see that same thing as a series director?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We love the haters. That's one thing in high limit that we love. It's the best motivation, and my mantra on that is that you can do all the talking in the world and say boo or cheer or whatever, and I can sit here and say I'm the greatest thing for sprint car racing and whatnot, but I think actions always speak louder than words, and so we use the haters as motivation, and when we're successful, that's our way of proving them wrong, and so it's fun to listen to them, and then at the end when we do a good job or we do everything right and we're winning. That's how we kind of get back at the haters when they don't want to see us successful and we're successful. So yeah, we love it, and we encourage more and more of the haters to keep hating on us because it only motivates us more.
Last question from supporter, and you kind of already answered this anyway, but do you ever foresee yourself, Alan wants to know, making a return to full-time racing? I feel like you kind of already answered this.
Yeah, I don't foresee, but like you just never say never in life. Right now, no. I feel like my plate is full. And so I would say, 25 or 30 races is probably a great number for me. Being able to go to all the races at Silver Dollar. Because, when you run a racetrack, you don't just do racing events. We'll do a destruction derby, a monster truck event, tractor pools. We're a part of the fair. We serve beer. We do other things. So, that's a good portion of me and my wife and our partner Colby Copeland and Kyle and Caitlin. We're all kind of a part of that racetrack, but that's a big part of what we do, and one of the things that we really enjoy and we're passionate about. So we put a lot of effort into Silver Dollar, and then if you go to a couple of NARC races, a couple of these West Coast things, I mean, your plate's pretty full. Would like to at least take a family vacation once or twice a year too.
As we wrap up here, is there anything I should have asked you about or anything else you want to say before we shut it down?
No, I think you did a good job. I think you asked a lot of good questions, and obviously, we're excited for the future, and just appreciate all the support from the fans, the promoters, everyone in the ecosystem of sprint car racing, and just really looking forward to seeing what the future holds, and yeah, hopefully 2026 will be another successful year for all of dirt track racing.